For over 15 years, Saturdays and Illegal Curve have been synonymous with one another. With insight, analysis, and interviews regarding the Winnipeg Jets, the Manitoba Moose, and all around the NHL, here are Dave Manouk, Ezra Ginsburg, and your host, Drew Mindell. The Illegal Curve Hockey Show, presented by Play Now, the official sports betting partner of the Winnipeg Jets, starts now.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. For all those joining us live this morning on our YouTube channel and all of our social media platforms, we say good morning, universe, and welcome to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show with Dave Manouk, with Ezra Ginsburg. We have a trade to announce. It doesn't involve the Winnipeg Jets, but it involves two teams that play in the Winnipeg Jets division. Just announced 3 minutes ago, the Nashville Predators have acquired Justus Annunen from the Colorado Avalanche and a 6th-round draft pick in exchange for goaltender Scott Wedgwood. So the Avs look to continue to try and find a serviceable goaltender. They give up on Justus Annunen in the process to do so. And there you go. There's some breaking news this early on a Saturday morning. Nice to see both of you gentlemen. It was only about 11 hours ago we last got together, but thought I'd start off the show with a little bit of a tangentially related to the Winnipeg Jets bit of news.
Yeah, but that's interesting, right, boys? Because, I mean, obviously, Nashville and Colorado have had their struggles this year, more so Nashville, right? But a lot of the talk has been, revolving around Colorado's goaltending with Justus Annunen and Alexander Georgiev, and obviously Jets fans are very familiar with Georgiev because he allowed a touchdown in game 1 of that first round series against the Jets, right? But then he played pretty well after that, game 2 through game 5, right? So, I mean, you could kind of, just looking at that trade kind of without diving too deep into it here, because obviously I hadn't, thanks for breaking that, Drew, because I didn't know about that. I hadn't checked Twitter.
You're a little too busy, snarfling a little bit of that donut or that bagel or whatever you're putting in your little paws there. We saw it. Don't worry.
Well, yeah, no. I can't come on a legal curve on an empty stomach, boys. No. But Justus Annunen, his numbers have not been great this year, and Scott Wedgwood's numbers have not been great this year, right? So you could look at it, Dave, and say face value, this is kind of a lateral move, right? Like, you can't really pick a winner of this trade, but obviously, to me, this just screamed shakeup.
It's a change of scenery trade where you take two goalies, neither of whom are doing much for their respective teams, and you just say, "Hey, we'll swap them around. We'll see about if they're any better in your venue than they are in our venue." Justus Annunen, he's still young. He's only 24, so I think there's probably a little bit maybe more upside there than Scott Wedgwood. But whatever it might be, we don't need to delve too deep into it. But just a little bit of a goalie shakeup for the Colorado Avalanche and the Nashville Predators early this morning. Speaking of shakeups, it's likely that there's going to be some forward shakeups to the Winnipeg Jets tomorrow afternoon in Dallas when they face the Stars, potentially some defensive shakeups as well. So why don't we delve deep into the forward group first to start this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Presented by Play Now, of course, as well. We know Nikolai Ehlers day-to-day, heading to Dallas with the team. The team is probably already in Dallas. They're going to be on the ice, I believe, at 2 o'clock this afternoon for a practice. I would imagine it'll be a relatively brief practice and much more of a video session to pinpoint some of the errors that were made in yesterday's loss to the Vegas Golden Knights, a loss where, as the headline in today's Winnipeg Free Press was all about, was there was a point there to be had that the Jets gave up by playing an uncharacteristically sloppy game. But I guess the question I would have for you guys to start this morning, if Ehlers is not in the lineup, and I'm going to put on my doctor cap and say I think it's probably unlikely that he is, if he's not in the lineup, is it as simple a swap as Alex Iafallo moving up to that second line and then somebody, probably David Gustafsson, coming into the Jets lineup as their 12th forward? Or do you think that this is a potential for Scott Arniel to maybe make some additional switches to the forward groups to see if you can rejuvenate a little bit, heading into Dallas tomorrow afternoon?
It's the most pertinent question going into the game against Dallas, right, Drew? Because I agree with you. I mean, none of us are doctors. We talked about it on last night's postgame show, but I mean, Ehlers didn't return to the game. It looks like he's not going to play. All we can hope for is that it's a short-term injury and not something that's going to keep him out of the lineup for a long time, because he's on pace for a career year this year, right, boys? So, you don't want to point to one or two players where you could say, if that guy's out of the lineup, that's going to hurt the Jets the most. But when you're talking about Ehlers, he is one of those players, right? Like, you'd throw Connor Hellebuck in there, you'd throw Josh Morrissey in there, you'd throw in Scheifele and Connor in there, right? Like, I mean, there's a bunch of players, but he's right at the top of that list. That's what I'm trying to say as far as, his importance to this team.
Right.
We saw a little bit of it last night, right, boys? Like, we saw Alex Iafallo elevated that second line. And because David Gustafsson can play wing, right, it makes a lot of sense that he comes into the lineup. And then your fourth line is Morgan Barron, Rasmus Kupari, and then David Gustafsson's on the wing, because the Jets only are carrying an extra forward, right? So if they wanted to call someone else up, they'd have to do some maneuvering. But yeah, that's what I would kind of expect, Drew, considering, this is the last game of a long road trip. I'd expect Gustafsson to go in there and then Iafallo to be on the second line. In terms of, other roster shakeups, I'm not sure. Like Scheifele, Connor, Velarde, I thought they were pretty good last night. They didn't have their best game. Obviously, we know, guys, Scheifele's dealing with something, and we can obviously, get into that, because it's obviously not preventing him from being in the lineup, right, Dave? But I would expect Gus Bus to go in, and then, Iafallo takes that spot on the second line. And again, like I said, I know it's, I'm not providing a ton of insight here, but hopefully it's just a short-term thing for Ehlers, because he's been one of the Jets' best players. We saw, his nice rush and assist on Cole Perfetti's first goal right last night. So hopefully it's not going to keep him out of the lineup for that long.
Yeah, Dave, what do you think about this, adjustment that the Jets are likely facing entering into tomorrow's game in Dallas? I mean, a game against the Stars. We know the Stars are probably out for a little bit of revenge after they were summarily beaten down by the Winnipeg Jets in their last meeting in Winnipeg, the one that gave the Jets the record for the best start in NHL history. That was, it probably feels like it was about 6 months ago. It was probably 2 weeks ago at this point, but whatever it was, it wasn't that long ago. So, the Stars definitely have a little taste for blood, in their mouth, and that, wanting to take it out on the Jets. Do you think that it's a simple swap, like as he said, or do you think that maybe Scott Arniel is going to use this as an opportunity to throw some additional things at the wall and can see what sticks for one game or longer? We don't know, of course, how long, or if he's even going to be out of the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem when the coach says it's day to day. Because as someone pointed out, day to day could be a day, it could be 3 months. I think Austin Matthews was day to day until he flew to Germany. That's right. But it's hard to know because we don't know the severity. I mean, he did in his post-game media availability, which I listened to after the show, said not good, obviously. So, I mean, that doesn't seem to mean like
you got to read between the lines there, right, Dave?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
That not him saying not good is not good.
Yeah,
you don't even have to put on your 3D glasses to see between those lines in that case. But I wonder if he also maybe meant more not good that he had to leave the game as opposed to not good on a long-term basis.
Did you listen to it or no?
No, I went to bed.
Okay, well, I'm just saying. So the if you listen to it, I don't think he was talking about not good that we lost him from the game. I think he was meaning specifically, it's not good, obviously.
Right.
And so to me, that indicates some sort of time period without Nikolai Ehlers, which again for the Jets isn't great because of what he's been able to bring. And as he said it, like on that first goal only happens because of his speed to grab the loose puck along the wall and then to set everything up with what he does in the zone. But I mean, at the same time, now it's a question about opportunity. Now, let's be realistic. Nobody on the farm is doing anything of significance. The farm team is not doing well. So if folks are like, oh, well, this guy's got points, like Lambert Chibrikov's points are all on the power play. They're all special teams points for the most part. Very few 5-on-5 points from them. Very few 5-on-5 points for anybody on the Moose because they don't score a lot of goals. I think they're 30th in the AHL right now in scoring. So nobody on the farm is now. Again, it's weird. Like I talked to someone who used to play in the NHL, and he'd say it's just the fact that some guys who are at the AHL level. When they play at the NHL level, they're just better. And nobody speaks to that more than like a guy like Axel Jonsson-Fjällby, who you watch him at the AHL level and you're just like, I don't get it, because he's fine when he's in the NHL. But again, like I said, so I don't know if they're going to call up someone like that, or if they're going to call up like a Lambert or a Chibrikov to give them a shot. And because again, one of the things that Scott O'Neill,
sorry, Dave, you'd have to think that I would lean more towards a Brad Lambert, right? Because you're talking about like this is if the injury is significant, that's what I'm trying to say, right? Like all due respect to Axel Jonsson-Fjällby, but Axel Jonsson-Fjällby is a guy that you're plugging in on the fourth line.
Well,
he's not a guy. He's not and the thing is, the question becomes, do you have enough offense in your lineup? If Jonsson-Fjällby is replacing someone on the fourth line, do you have confidence in a guy like Alex Iafallo to kind of weather the storm while Ehlers is out of the lineup? And obviously, Dave, I'm not going to contradict what you said, obviously, because you watch the Moose more than anybody, and you would know if like Brad Lambert if he's knocking at the door to get that call up from the NHL. But the question becomes like, what else are your other options, right, boys?
Well, and the only thing I was going to, like, I guess kind of the conclusion of my thought was just that it's what Scott O'Neill talked about in the, the idea of, if you're going to plug a guy in, are you plugging in a third or fourth liner into the first and second line? Now you can do that in game, of course, that makes sense. But when you're actually replacing, again, especially if you're talking about replacing a guy on a, couple of week basis, whatever it's going to be, then at that point, you want to have someone with more skill to put alongside Cole Perfetti and Vlad Nemesnikov. So look, I think it would be a chance for Brad Lambert or Nikita Chibrikov. You can bring either of them up and you can put them in, because at the end of the day, they may thrive. They may, have a little more talent surrounding them. And that might be enough to give them the boost that they need to start to have some, to excel this season. And I'm not saying, look, like I said, that trio, or not trio, because Elias Salamonson, I'm thinking of Jets prospects, were all together on the ice yesterday when they scored the lone goal in a 6-1 loss. But the like I said, just nobody's blowing the doors off. So I don't know what the team's going to do. And again, we have to also factor in, again, are they going to put Ehlers on IR or not? Because as I said, then you start to have to make moves. And so it's a tough situation for the Jets, because like I said, I'm just going to say that nobody in the Moose is blowing the doors off and saying, well, this guy's ready. He's scratching the surface. They just don't have space for him. Like I said, I like what they're doing, but it's just not enough right now to say.
There's no obvious candidate to come up from the Moose to step into a role right now because they are struggling.
I would say like this is the perfect comment by Doug. Iafallo is the stopgap filler. If Ehlers is out longer term, more than 7 days, bring in Lambert. That's the way.
That's what I said, right, Dave?
Yeah.
Like that. Like again, it's easy. Sorry, Drew. It's easy for us to point down to the Moose. The most obvious guy that has the offensive touch is Brad Lambert, right?
Sure.
And Nikita Chibrikov.
But
more so Lambert. So I mean, it all, guys. It all. I know, like it's not a cop out answer here or a cop out statement, but it really all depends how long is Ehlers going to be out of the lineup, because Scheifele, Connor, Velarde, they're playing well despite Scheifele's injury. That line is putting up goals on a nightly basis, and without Ehlers there, we know he's the driver of that Nemesnikov line. All due respect to Nemesnikov and Perfetti, he's the one. We saw it on Perfetti's goal last night, right? Like with his speed and skill, he's the guy that really drives that line. So, I'm kind of leaning towards, if Ehlers is out long term, Lambert is going to get the call up. But again, this is all speculation at this point.
Well, and I think about it, and I mean, I agree with most of the assessments so far. I would say that they all make sense. You're not going to, fly in Brad Lambert for one game into Dallas to play Sunday, throw him right into that frying pan. When David Gustafsson has been the good soldier, waiting and biding his time, it becomes more of an option. I think Lambert becomes more of an option once you know how long you're without Nikolai Ehlers for.
Yeah, for that game against St. Louis when they get back home, then you can call him up. But you're absolutely right, Drew. They're not flying in Brad Lambert like he's the savior for one game on the road trip.
Right, exactly right. What I'm curious about, more so looking at tomorrow's game against Dallas, and this is all with the assumption that Ehlers is not going to play, which of course we don't know for certain. So with that as the asterisk, and with that
like an Undertaker come out of the box, Nikolai Ehlers.
Yeah, maybe, that would be good. That would certainly be an unusual way to start the game. But, if they wheel a coffin out and, lightning strikes him
I've
and he
always wanted to have a
pops out,
casket match with Drew.
well, Ezzy, we can maybe, bring that to the people one day. Well, when it's
We'll
the
do it at
slow
the next
season.
Boston Pizza appearance.
Yeah, exactly. We'll set up a little ring, and you and I, and the question will be who will be Paul Bearer. Although I think in real life he may have passed away, so rest in peace, Paul Bearer.
He did pass away. I think I think Spency would play the role of Paul Bearer. By the way,
I can see that. In any event, what I'm curious about, at least for tomorrow, is does that with Iafallo up there, if he goes up there, does that give enough speed to that line? An Iafallo, Namestnikov, Perfetti line is not a line that is particularly fleet of foot. So I wonder, again, you're on the last game of a road trip. You're at the last game. You're in the midst of a bit of a grinding part of it. You're looking for anything to sort of maybe give a little bit of a shock to the system, a little bit of an energy boost. I wonder if you maybe try to use Erasmus Kupari and the speed that he brings in an elevated role. You leave Iafallo with Barron on a fourth line role, and maybe you try Kupari there, and then Gustafsson, who can play center, certainly has experience playing center. Maybe he comes in the lineup, as your fourth line center, and Kupari comes up, a guy who's been really effective for the Jets this year. Not putting up a ton of points, but you wouldn't expect him to, but noticeable and impactful on games. Maybe he gets a shot to use that speed on the wing with Namestnikov and with Perfetti for a one-game audition tomorrow afternoon in Dallas, as opposed to an Alex Iafallo who, you sort of know what the ceiling of that would be. That's not a criticism, but I wonder if you try and maybe use it to give it a little jump start to the system for that one-off game.
I think it's valid what you bring up, because if you base that just on merit alone, right? Like, I agree with you, Drew. Anybody who doesn't watch this team would look at Kupari and they'd say 2 goals, 3 points. Oh, like, that's not that good. Right. But I'll give Dave M credit here. From the first 3 or 4 games of the season, Dave has been singing the praises of Kupari, and he deserves it, right? Like, he has elevated. And look, he's a first-round pick. Like this, it's not like Kupari doesn't come without a lot of potential, right? Like, he just didn't fulfill his potential in LA. That's why he was in kind of a throw-in, right, guys, in the Dubois trade.
Well, but not a throw-in from the Jets' perspective. Obviously, but a player the Jets, liked and wanted to acquire. So they think that they're still, they talked about it all off season, really from the start of training camp, that they thought that there's still, some upside there, and they want to see that.
And I look at Kupari, and he's taken advantage of the opportunity. Like, Dave talked about that so much during training camp, right? Because I think a lot of people thought Gustafsson was going to be the one that ultimately played more games than Kupari based on last season. But Kupari has taken, he's played well, put it that way. So the Jets have options, Drew. Getting back to your idea of Kupari possibly playing on the wing, even if that's for one game.
Right.
I think based on the way he's played, I'd like to see that. And I think, Dave, one thing I want to throw in there quickly before you get in here, one thing about Kupari's game that I think I've noticed more this year is his physicality, which I like. And in games, like when you're playing teams like the LA Kings, the Vegas Golden Knights, Dallas Stars, like these are conference rivals. I've noticed that. And he's a guy that brings a physical edge. So he could bring a physical edge to that line. Because let's be honest, like Namestnikov is a scrappy player. Perfetti's obviously not a guy that's known as a physical player. So with his speed and physicality, he could change the dynamic of that second line. So again, Scott Arniel has options here. Like, what about Nino Niederreiter, right? Like a lot of people think, well, he's stapled to that third line with Lowry and Appleton, but Niederreiter's had a very underrated year. He's an option on the left wing on that second line, right, guys? So like, this Ehlers injury isn't the end of the season for the Jets, right? Like, they have a lot of, let's not forget, guys, when everybody talks about the Jets' success, a lot of it centers around their forward depth, right? So it'll be really, really interesting to see what Scott Arniel does here, even if it's just for a game. But the big question is, if Ehlers is out long-term, is Brad Lambert going to get the call up? Because obviously he adds a lot more offensive punch to that second line than, any of these other players that we're talking about.
No question about it. Saturday morning, the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Dave, I want your opinion on this. It's presented by Play Now. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you. Christian Amell from CJOB 680 coming up at the bottom of the hour. But what about that idea for that one-off, at least to start? You can only do one game at a time. So one-off, with a Kupari moving up, maybe rewarding a young player who has shown well through the first 24 games of this season.
Yeah, and the other thing I would suggest that we haven't thought about is because of all the defensemen they have, it's possible they'll go 11-7.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they do 100%, but I'm not saying that they will. I'm saying that I wouldn't do 11-7. I would do 11-7 if Scheifele was healthy, but because of his uncertainty and
because it's almost 10.5-7, right?
Yeah, exactly. You don't necessarily want to overtax him, I think, is what I would do. But I'm saying it is an option because, of course, they have the extra defenseman there with them. But yeah, it is an interesting conundrum that the Jets have because they know where they're heading with this. I don't know if the doctor's on the team with them. We don't know if they have an idea of the severity of the Ehlers situation. So I'm of the same mind as you guys that for this one game against Dallas, you probably don't necessarily bring up Lambert for the game, but you could. I mean, again, like I said, it's an easier flight. He leaves today, goes to Texas, and then he skates with the team tomorrow at morning skate. Or he probably wouldn't be there with them today. But again, like I said, we'll see. To me, it's just a function of like this team saying, okay, well, we are trying to replace this type of piece with this type of piece. And, again, with all due respect to Iafallo, he's not Ehlers, obviously. And I'm not saying Lambert is Ehlers, but he's a more complementary example of that type of player. So that is what you would do. And again, like I said, to me, I like the comment earlier because I agree with it. I think it was by Doug. And that's if you're for one game, you give a guy, whether it's a Kupari because you want that speed element. I agree with the hands element, but if you want someone to give that line a little speed, but then again, like I said, speed for the sake of speed isn't necessarily a good thing because, Perfetti doesn't exactly have blistering speed, obviously. Nemestikov is fine. And so, maybe change the composition of that line or Morgan Barron, right? Even though he made the egregious mistake yesterday, there's another guy who folks are saying, well, you've wanted him to have more of an option, a little more of a role. Well, maybe he gets one game to kind of see if he can do something. But, and obviously he's got some familiarity playing with Cole Perfetti, which they did together, I think, on the Moose. But yeah, like I said, from my perspective, for the one game, because you don't know the severity potentially of the Ehlers situation, I think you can kind of move one of those guys up, bring in Gustafsson because it is a kind of bit of a kick in the teeth for Gustafsson to have sat this long. Now you could say, well, if they replace Lambert or Ehlers with Lambert, it makes sense because that's the kind of player he wants. And that's what you want to see the organization do, right? A top six guy. So you get a top six guy from the Moose. That's the role Lambert's been playing. You put him up there with the, into that top six with the Jets. And then for example, if it was a Kupari or an Iafallo who gets injured, then Gustafsson comes in. That would be a consistent messaging. But again, like I said, we'll see. I'm more inclined to watch the Tuesday game than I am about the Sunday game and get overly concerned one way or the other.
Oh, I think the Tuesday game, to your point there, I think the Tuesday game will give should likely give a glimpse into what the more long-term approach would be. When you're dealing with Sunday, you're dealing with the end of a road trip, the sixth game on this long road trip. You're dealing with sort of a one-off where you're not in, you don't know how much. You're not in a position where you can really do revolutionary changes at that point in time that are going to impact both the Jets and the Moose. I just don't see them airlifting a Moose player in, dropping them into the top six when you have a guy who's on the road with you. It'd be very much, if it was game one of the road trip, fine, maybe then there's a longer runway there. But why bother flying him in, get in either today, tomorrow, barely meet the players again, see the guys again, and straight into the lineup? To me, that wouldn't be a logical course of action for this Jets team. It would be out of character for them to do that, I would imagine. Whereas I think that the internal options are your more likely option. It's just I don't think it's as simple or cut and paste as just bump Iafallo up. In game for sure, because he's the veteran guy who can play up and down, smart player, knows how, in a pinch, he knows how to work with anybody. But if you're really trying to try something a bit different, I wouldn't mind it. I mean, I don't expect it necessarily, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't mind seeing if it were to happen where
Are
a
we
guy
still
like
talking
Kupari moves
Kupari?
up.
Are
Yeah,
we still talking Kupari? Yeah. I mean, all due respect to these players, I think, to a certain degree, they're pretty interchangeable, right? Like they're different players, but we had the comment up from Rob about
Yeah, that's a good
about
one.
Appleton. Like, yeah, Appleton's had a good year, right? Like, and that's the thing, right, Drew? We're talking about one game here against Dallas.
Right.
Like, if Ehlers is out long term, and then that line starts to struggle scoring offensively, like we've talked about this so many times, your second line has to be a line that's contributing on a regular basis. So if that second line without Ehlers is struggling with whether it's Kupari on that line, whether it's Iafallo, then I think you absolutely are going to see Brad Lambert in the lineup.
Yeah.
But this all depends on how long Ehlers is going to be out of the lineup. But he's that important to this team. We talk about it all the time at even strength. And I keep going back to that goal. But I mean, that was quintessential Ehlers, right? Coming into the zone with speed, getting an original shot, getting the puck back, then getting it to Morrissey, who puts the shot on net for Perfetti to tip it. Like, Ehlers is one of your top offensive players.
He's a unicorn type of player, not only on the Jets, but on a lot of teams in this league because of what he can do at top speed without being reckless. I mean, there's a lot of fast players, some of whom just are Wile E. Coyote and go right through the end boards and don't actually accomplish anything with that speed. But Ehlers, with his speed, can do so much more. And as a result, that's why most teams have to sort of game plan or be aware, at least when he's on the ice. I mean, Alex Pietrangelo doesn't get embarrassed on video very often. Ehlers did that to him yesterday. Maybe not embarrassed, but put on his heels and made to look pedestrian. And that's what Ehlers can do with his speed. So that being out of the Jets lineup, and we don't know necessarily if it's going to be out, at all or one game or longer than that. But, that's it's a unicorn skill set that he brings to the Jets that not a lot of other players can potentially replicate. Let's take a break there. Christian Amell, CJOB 680 is set to join us. More Jets talk to come. It's a Saturday morning. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Dave Minuk is wearing red. Drew Mandel is wearing red. Ezra Ginsburg's wearing gray. I'm not sure what the rest of you are wearing, but I hope it's clothes. Much more to come. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show live on our YouTube channel. Bottom of the hour. Welcome back to the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg. Program is presented by our friends at Play Now. They are hang on, let me pull it up here. They are Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site. Don't bet on illegal sites. Bet with Play Now instead. 18 plus. Enjoy responsibly. We keep the Winnipeg Jets talk going on this Saturday morning by welcoming to the program Christian Amell from 680 CJOB.
Look at that stash.
That's what I'm going to ask. Is it leaving tomorrow or is it going to last for a little longer?
So generally the plan is to shave it the moment November ends.
Right.
But I've been told by the lady that she likes it.
Wow.
So therefore it's going to stay for a bit more. I hate how it feels on my face, honestly. It's it's starting to grow on me a little bit, pun kind of intended, but I think she wants it sort of as a Christmas gift to like give it a try for a few more weeks. She says it suits me well, so I'll take her word for it and give it a shot. Maybe I'm a mustache man now.
You know what? At the beginning of November, I shaved the beard part and I kept the handlebar mustache, which I think is a great look. But my wife has threatened to leave me if I don't immediately shave it off. So I think that your partner is onto something in saying keep the stash, because I do think that it's a sign of virility and masculinity and strength. So I mean, tell Toth to shave off his ridiculous one, but
Okay.
you can pull that off moving forward.
Now, I also, because I can't grow beards like Dave and Ezzy, like if I started when I was 0 years old and to where I am now as a 32-and-a-half-year-old man, I would not have a beard as long as you guys do. I can't grow the beard. The mustache is the good part for me.
Interesting.
But I think I might give it a try. And if my dad was always a goatee man, I don't think I've ever seen him clean shaven in my entire life. So I don't necessarily want to follow in his footsteps, but I don't really think I need to criticize my partner's view. I think I should just go with it, and if it makes her happy, stick with it.
Lean into it. I would agree with that. Let's move back from the facial hair, where the Jets have been sporting some good facial hair, admittedly. Kyle Connor in particular with his Doug Smale impersonation. But on ice for the Jets, a struggle last night in Vegas, a game that they probably rue missing out on at least 1 point, given some of the defensive breakdowns that were uncharacteristic of them. So I want to start with last night's game from your perspective and your analysis, on 680 CJOB. Is that, the defensive breakdowns came from players that we typically don't see them from? You think Adam Lowry with a blown coverage, Vlad Namestnikov with a blown coverage, Morgan Barron with the soft turnover. To you, is that just a sign of a team that's a little bit fatigued at the end of this long road trip, or is there something more concerning for you to sort of weigh in on?
I think when we're looking at the Jets, I think there's several things that go into the mixing bowl to create this cake that they've baked over this last couple of weeks. Because let's face it, as much as they don't want to make the schedule an excuse, it's hard, right? You've got 10 games in 10 different cities, and that doesn't actually change when they go home for one game and then go out on the road for 2 more. I think Kelly Moore on the broadcast last night said the full scope of it is 15 in a row where you're not playing in the same city in consecutive games, which is huge. That's a long run of play to try and be at your absolute best, and a lot of it's on the road. It's tougher to play on the road, right? That's part of why road trips are tough, and they have had such a good run of play and a good run of health, but at some point, for everybody, that catches up to you. And I think for the Jets right now, there's a few factors. One, I think weariness is part of it. I think what we saw in LA was kind of like what we saw in Florida a few weeks ago, where they're able to actually come out of that. They weren't very good. They practiced, and then the next game they beat Florida and looked a lot better. They practiced on Thursday, and they did look better in Vegas last night than they did in LA for sure, but not as good as they did in Florida against Florida a couple weeks ago. I think there's a bit of a sloppiness to their game that we haven't seen. The defensive structure isn't quite there. We also have to credit Vegas, right? The Jets haven't beaten Vegas in forever. They're 1-10 in their last 11 if you include the playoffs last year or 2 years ago. So
Vegas is to the Jets what the Jets are to the Wild.
Yeah, everyone's got that team that they just can't beat, right? And for the Jets, Vegas has been a really tough out for them. I like the fact that they were able to fight back, which we hadn't seen in the last few losses, where they blew it at the end of the first period, but they got it to 2-2 going to the third. They get it to 3-3 in the third. But yeah, too many mistakes, right? They needed to get out of the first up 1-0. I think would have been huge for them. They get the power play that doesn't work, but that Lowry line comes out and keeps the forecheck going. It was going really well. Then Barron just makes a bad play, and we don't see egregious bad plays that much with this Winnipeg Jets team, right? It's more subtle things that go wrong, and then whether it's Logan Stanley or whoever is there, I don't know who wins that fight. If they're completely flat-footed, right? That's a tough one for any defenseman being there. And then the next goal, right? All the 3 of the other goals felt like chasing the play, where people lost track. The one where it bounces off Iafalo's skate, and then he and Kupari are both kind of adrift. That's a tough one because it's a bouncing puck, and all of a sudden Barbashev's just in the slot with a wide open look. That's tough. But the Carlson play for the winner, he got up the ice way too easy on that play. There was a lot of open ice all of a sudden, and next thing you know, Brett Howden's at the back door for a tap in. So yeah, there's they like to say the video doesn't lie. They'll be skating in Dallas today, and I think there's a for sure a weariness. They want to get home. They want to be able to kind of just park for a bit. I think that's a little uneasy, but at the same time, yeah, their game's a little bit worse. They're still 18-6, so that's pretty good. We always have to remember that. But yeah I think the game is different, but that's a natural thing to have happen after the incredible start they had of the season.
Christian, before I ask you my question, what's that USHL jersey? Is that the Cedar Rapids Rough Riders? Who is that?
No, this is the Sioux Falls Fighting Wiener Dogs. So every year, the Sioux Falls Stampede, they rebrand themselves for one game as the Fighting Wiener Dogs to raise money for a local rescue, and they have dogs you can adopt at the game. I just found out about this. So this Twitter sucks, but I go on it all the time. And last year I was just cruising through it while killing time before work, and I saw that they were doing this. The Sioux Falls Fighting Wiener Dogs. We do have a wiener dog in our house.
That was going to be my question.
So I saw this. I'm like, oh my God. And so I showed my partner, and I ordered this jersey. I ordered her a crew sweater, hat, and I ordered our wiener dog a jersey that doesn't fit her properly because she's a wiener dog and has odd proportions. So we want to go to a game. This year I don't think work. It's in February. I think I've got some other stuff I need to do that day, but we want to make a trip to Sioux Falls and hopefully not coming home with multiple wiener dogs when we go to that game someday. But I think it's really cool that they do that. I think the jersey's cool, and I'm repping it today.
Okay, but Christian, anybody who's seen you before on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show knows you have a cat as well. So I guess Sully didn't get anything, right?
No, they didn't have any cat products for the Fighting Wiener Dogs. I'm sorry to say.
Well, it's an awesome jersey. I had to ask because there are a bunch of people in the chat. You could see around just below your neck, you could see the USHL logo, but it was hard to figure out what the jersey was. So we had to
Sioux Nation Pet Clinic logo on the chest there. So
yeah, it's a sweet jersey. We got to talk about Nick Ehlers, right? Like we're gonna. Mike McIntyre of the Winnipeg Free Press reported that we're expecting to find out an update on Ehlers after the Jets skate. So that'll be around 2:00. Obviously, CJOB will be all over it. So we don't know the extent of Ehlers' injury, but let's go under the assumption that Ehlers is going to be out for a significant amount of time. Do the Jets have enough in-house, in your opinion, to make up for the loss of Ehlers? Because you know where this is going to go. I mean, a lot of talk at the beginning of the season was, can Brad Lambert crack the top six? Obviously, he's played the entire season with the Moose, but in your opinion, just I'll ask it point blank, is this Brad Lambert time if Ehlers is going to be out a significant amount of time?
So I think there's two ways to go with this. There's the way I want to see Brad Lambert. I think that's fun. I also recognize that it's probably not going to happen right away because that seems to go against what the Jets tend to do. I think the fact that it's December by the time they play their next game, it's still early enough in the season that you don't need to do that, I think. But it's going to be more so about how long he's going to be out because I think they have faith that Perfetti, Nemestikov, Iafallo can work. I think that's a fine trio. I think that the results have been positive in the past when they've played together. I also think that it's not a super inspiring second line of a team that wants to win the title. That's not going to be the line going into the playoffs. I think we recognize that. Ehlers will be back. Lord knows Chevy's going to do something probably before the trade deadline, right? They always do. And you look at the trickle down the lineup. David Gustafsson would come in. He's been a solid fourth liner for the team, right? And Barron and Kupari could work together, but you lose that dynamism of Ehlers, and that second line with Perfetti, Iafallo, and Nemestikov, it feels kind of plodding, right? Compared to what Ehlers would bring in. Lambert has that same kind of dynamism, but as we saw in the preseason in a small amount that he's probably not quite ready to make that jump yet. Dave, you watch the Moose a lot more than the rest of us do. They got cooked last night, but have you seen enough from him to suggest that he would be ready to make that leap right now, or does he just need to get into game reps? It's December, let him play 15 games and see what he can do.
Yeah, well, sorry, I'm not used to getting questions from the guests, but I'll take it if you want. No, I mean, that's what we were talking about just before you came on, was just this idea of can you give these guys that opportunity and can you plug them in? And for us, the uncertainty really is with Ehlers because you don't know the extent of it. So you're not going to, I don't think, as we discussed, that you're recalling Brad Lambert for tomorrow's game. But if it's more significant with Ehlers, which we believe it is, but we don't know if it is, then my inclination would be to give someone again, the Moose have not been scoring. The Moose have not collectively as a group been a very good hockey team. They've had some flashes, but overall it has been there's been a paucity of goal scoring on this team. To me, you could promote a guy like Lambert, and if he's playing with someone like Perfetti and Nemestikov, could have a little more success than he's having right now at the AHL level.
Sorry to hijack the show there.
That's okay.
Hijack away. Well, you're fine. Keep going.
No, Christian, you're a host. That's natural for you.
Yeah, no, go.
Oh, it's true. I'm the one that's not used to being asked questions, right? I mean, I host a show 3 to 5 nights a week, depending on how much the Jets play.
And now, Christian, you could tell Drew to reset the show.
I'm going to let Christian reset the show. Why do I need to be here? I'm just going to, peace
I'm
out
not
a
getting
little bit.
paid for this.
Yeah, Drew, come on, reset the show.
Okay,
Let's go.
fine. Christian Amell, 680 CJOB is our guest Saturday morning. It's the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Manuka, Ezra Ginsburg with you, presented by our friends at Play Now. The Jets in Dallas tomorrow afternoon to meet the Dallas Stars. The game, of course, you can hear live on 680 CJOB.
Okay, Christian. So we need to talk about Mark Scheifele because I can't believe
me
we
a question now. Then I was going to ask Izzy a question.
Not
We're just
interested.
gonna go
Not
around
interested.
And around and around.
But what I am interested, because it's been 46 minutes of our show already, we haven't really touched on the Mark Scheifele situation in any significant degree. But I don't understand what's going on. The 19th against the Florida Panthers, he takes 14 faceoffs, has a great night against Florida. Jets win. And then the next day, which was a practice, he takes a maintenance day. And since then, he is no longer Mark Scheifele, the center, as he pointed out yesterday. He's Mark Scheifele, the guy defensively is center, but doesn't take faceoffs. Gabriel Velarde now is the faceoff man of that line. So what do you think is going on? I'm not going to ask you to speculate as to the nature of what he's dealing with, but just more in terms of, like, he's clearly still able to play, but do you think this has anything to do with this Four Nations? And if it is that not a little irresponsible to not allow the guy to, if he needs to heal in some capacity, give him some time off so you bank some points? What do you think is kind of going on with this situation? Because it's very unusual.
So I've had a few thoughts enter my head since this started happening. I did at one point wonder, do you actually think this is because of the Four Nations face-off? And I thought, I don't know. There's enough body of work already done here that missing 4 to 6 games isn't going to suddenly tank his chances. I think he's done enough to make Team Canada for that.
Having a double day off gives zero figs whatsoever about the Four Nations Cup, let me tell you.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, it's all about winning for the Jets, right? And I think for Scheifele, the question always is, when there's injured players, is a compromised player X better in your lineup than calling up or putting in player Y, right? And for the Jets, having some of Mark Scheifele, the calculus has been to this point, is better than sitting him. But you look at the results since he got hurt. I know Gabe Velarde's been winning a good amount of faceoffs, but that line hasn't really been all that productive at 5-on-5 since his injury, whatever the heck happened to him, and they're being so secretive about it. It's curious, right? You think, okay, you're at this point in the season where it's this long stretch of action and you've got a pretty nice cushion. Why not sit him? And maybe it's the kind of injury that it doesn't matter if you sit or you play, and that doesn't really make a difference in the healing process. But again, it's about effectiveness, right? Do you want to disrupt this line that's played every minute pretty much together this season, save for a couple moments where they were split up earlier on? I haven't loved what I've seen out of that grouping. I think Scheifele looked a bit better last night, I think, against Vegas than he had in previous games.
His shot looked a little bit more alive than not necessarily on target, but his shot looked a little bit more alive than it had against LA in a couple games before that.
Yeah, I feel like we haven't really seen him with the puck a lot in the last number of games, right? And he's kind of just out there to some degree. But I think the power play last night looked a bit better with him out there. I think maybe you wonder if it's like a hand thing or a wrist thing. He got in a fight against Ekblad, and then he plays against Florida, then the maintenance day. That's the speculation part of this. Who knows, right? But they know more than we do. That's the big thing. So we can think of, he should sit, he should play, Four Nations, whatever. They know we don't, which is, I like transparency, and I think Scott O'Neill's done a good job of telling us stuff. I think he's been pretty good with that this year, but there's a reason they're not telling us this. And that's usually some kind of competitive thing, right? If he's trying to play through something, they don't want the opponents to know what that is so they can target it.
Well, to me, what Christian, about this injury, because he's clearly got something, is it something that heals up if he takes 3 days, 5 days, 7 days off, or is it something that lingers for the entirety of the season? And I think that's the big calculus, and that's the big unknown. Can the Jets manage this through, let's say, until the Christmas break, then they get the however many days off it is. I think it's about 4 or 5 days off. And does that heal Mark Scheifele up close enough to 100%? Or is this something that requires really an entire off season worth of, healing or a significant period of time that you just aren't going to get in this season with the compacted schedule unless you are sitting him out of the lineup for a big chunk of games. That's the calculus, and that's I think the weighing of the decision on the within the Jets organization and the Jets training staff and Mark Scheifele and everybody involved with the team is how does he get healthy? How long does it take to get healthy? And is it something that is really just going to be there all year long?
Yeah, that's something that we have to wait and see. And then the question is, of course, if you need a month to heal, Four Nations face-off, you're not playing in it, right? That would be the big thing. And that would be ultimately probably the Jets' call to say, dude, no. And then, a year later, is he going to be still able to make the Olympics, which is more important than the Four Nations face-off. The Olympics are more important for sure. Mm-hmm. And he'll still be having a chance to do that. But yeah, these are all things that we opine about, we wonder about, and we will not know perhaps until the end of the season when they do the whole, here's what everyone was playing with list. That we're always like, what? How? What? But if he is hampered like this, that sucks for the Jets because he was having a great start to the season and simply hasn't been the same since this happened.
Yeah, Christian, I always
5 games.
Yeah, I always love at the end of the season. This guy was playing with 2 broken legs. This guy actually didn't have a heart. Somehow he was playing without a heart. But further to your point about Scheifele, and I agree with Dave. Like, it is bizarre because it's obvious. Like, it's not like I joked that Mark Scheifele's letting Vilardi take the faceoffs because he's auditioning as a winger for Team Canada, right? Obviously, that's not what's happening. But what makes this so perplexing is. And Drew asked you the question about like if this was something where 3, 4, 5 days, 6 days, whatever, if it could heal, then like why wouldn't they do that? The Jets have had a huge cushion, like going on before this road trip. The Jets were 15-3, 16-3, whatever they were. So it's like it's not like you don't have the luxury of keeping Scheifele out of the lineup for 3, 4, 5, 6 games, whatever. Obviously, it's something that he thinks he's good enough that he can keep playing, and the medical staff thinks that he's good enough and can keep playing. And again, I don't want to belabor the point because, like you said, Christian, we need more information in terms, and we might not get it. We're hoping to get information on Ehlers this afternoon, but we're not going to. I don't think we're going to get a lot of information on Scheifele because they don't want other teams to know. Oh, he's got a wrist injury, and then you're going to have guys hacking at his wrist. In future games in Dallas or against St. Louis, right? So that's what kind of makes this even more difficult, I guess, to kind of figure out what it is, because it seems like he's trying to just play through it.
Yeah, and hockey players are admired for their ability to play through stuff, right? That's part of the mystique of a hockey player is to go out there when you're not at your best. But there's also a point of diminishing returns at which, okay, you're not your best, but you're also not helping us. Right. And I think the Jets are trying to straddle that right now. They know if he's got something that takes 2 weeks to heal and it doesn't matter if you play or don't play. If it's a week thing that it would take a week to heal and he would have to sit out 3 games, I think he would have sat out 3 games. I think that would have happened. I don't think the Jets are trying. It's not like they're pushing for a playoff spot. They need every point they can get right now. Right. So I think that leads me to think that it must be something that, to Drew's point, is either something that he's just going to have to play through for the season, which that is not a great thought for the Winnipeg Jets, or it's just something that takes a couple weeks. Doesn't matter if you play or don't play. It's going to heal up the same or similarly, and you just have to protect it and make sure no one knows about it out in the real world. But I also think that other teams can watch the film and probably suss out what someone is dealing with.
Exactly.
Because they're hockey players and they just know by looking at how someone is playing, how someone's carrying their body and moving, what might be wrong with them. So I think these are all the mystery of Mark Scheifele that we're dealing with right now. And maybe someday we'll learn the answer. Maybe.
Christian, we had the curious case of Ville Heinola. How many games would Ville get? We thought that there'd be a little bit of runway for him to kind of take this opportunity and see what he could do with it. The runway was 2 games. And, Logan Stanley gets activated off IR, which was a curious decision. Didn't look like he was completely back, looked a little bit ponderous yesterday, I thought. But from your perspective, are you a little surprised that, especially given all the things that Scott O'Neill said about Ville Heinola, that he was only given the 2 games and rather than, like I said, 3, 4, 5 games in a row, let Stanley heal sufficiently. And then, and again, this may be the start of a rotation. We may see Heinola back in tomorrow, but just from your perspective, what did you see from the two games with Ville Heinola in, and were you a little surprised that he was taken out yesterday?
I thought he looked okay. I think playing with a veteran like Miller is great for his game. I've thought since the start of #FreeVille that he needs like 10 to 15 games in a row where he's playing, right? This in and out just is not good for him. And you're never going to really get a sense of somebody and what they can do if they're just getting in and out of the lineup all the time. That's so disruptive. So I don't love the fact that he was pulled out last night. I understand the idea of rotation here because you want to keep guys fresh, especially with Sandberg out. But at the same time, they just started doing it now after not doing it at any point, even though Scott Arniel kind of hinted that there might be some kind of rotation with the fourth line or with the third pair. I understand not wanting to touch something that's been working, but you've also got this 82-game marathon, too, that you've got to look at. Did Logan Stanley and Dylan Coghlan coming in last night cost them the game against Vegas? No, it did not. They were going to lose that game the way it happened anyway. I think analytically they were over 50% in expected goals, very sheltered minutes for them. But I didn't think Coghlan looked terrible, honestly. I thought he looked better than Stanley did. I think for Stanley, there was that one sequence where he had, I think, 2 blown zone exits and they got hemmed in for a while. And you're just like, oh boy, here we go. So it'll be interesting, right? Because if Heinola and Miller come back in tomorrow, which if I were to bet, I'd say that's what's going to happen, especially considering what we saw from Stanley and Coghlan didn't, blow the doors off last night. I think that's more likely what we're going to see. Again, if it's a platoon, that's still not great for Ville Heinola, right?
No.
I think, he's got to play. I'd like to see 10 straight games of him and Miller together to see what chemistry can be bonded and just to see how he looks in an NHL lineup. Because, again, it's December. You can do that right now. You can play him in 10 straight games, and then if you don't like it, then, okay, he has to clear waivers. They're not going to put him down at any point now, right? It'll be interesting to see when Sandberg is healthy, if assuming no one else gets hurt, what they do. And it's probably Coghlan that goes on waivers. I want to see him play. I do, because you're never going to know unless you see him play. And we've been talking about this for how many years now? We just need to see him play.
I'm with you, Christian. And I think, sorry, Drew, just to make one quick point here, especially for a guy who hasn't played a lot of hockey in the last couple of years, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I'm with you. Like, I understand even though I don't really like Dylan Coghlan used to play for Vegas, like, did that factor in? I have no idea, because like to get him into a game, like, we're talking about, this is game 24 here, right? Like, so if you wanted to get into a game, you had 23 other opportunities to get into a game. To me, what was curious is that you get 2 guys that haven't played in a while into the lineup at the same time. So I'm with you. I obviously don't know this, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ville Heinola and Colin Miller both get back into the lineup against Dallas, or at the very least, one of those guys gets back into the lineup, probably Heinola. And I'm with you. Give Heinola. It's time to take the training wheels off Heinola and not have him in for 1 or 2 games, off 1 or 2 games, in for 3 games, out for 3 games. It's enough of that.
Yeah, and if he goes 10 to 15 and he can't cut it, then he can't cut it, right? And then we know. But we've been talking about this for 3 or 4 years now. We just simply don't have data for a long stretch to know if he can do it or not.
Whereas we have the data on Logan Stanley, and they keep trying to make him a thing, even though the data clearly shows that he's not a thing at the NHL level or at the level the Jets want to be at. So, I mean, it is always very interesting, the dynamics at play and the continual leash that one player gets when it's evident to most people that there's not a lot left there. Whereas the other player, who we haven't seen yet, hasn't yet got that same amount of leash. To which I want to ask you, sticking with Ville Heinola, would you maybe want to see him take on where Hayden Fleury is currently playing? Obviously the Sandberg injury has thrown everything on that left side for a bit of a loop. But, maybe you put him up with a Neil Pionk and you see about a small puck-moving, pair that might be a little bit defensively liable, but all due respect to Hayden Fleury, who's playing above his head, I would argue, it's not like he is anything super defensively in his own zone either.
I think if Ville Heinola did not have that infection at the start of training camp and he was able to play this whole time, then perhaps that's a spot that he'd be in right now. And we're always going to look at that ankle injury last year. That could be the defining moment of his career, unfortunately. And it's because he was on the opening night roster last year. He would have been this year probably. And he keeps having these setbacks. And so I worry about conditioning and having to play all of a sudden 22 minutes or something. I know Fleury only played 17 last night, and it's going to probably be something like that for Heinola. But that's the one spot where I would worry. Ability-wise, I think it's worth a shot, right? Because, okay, you got Hayden Fleury, picked him off. Hayden Fleury, Dylan Coghlan are just two dudes, right? Whereas Willing Heinola, you'd like to think is part of your long term, and ideally that's kind of tempting, right? To see what he can do there. And I think the Jets I guess they're not feeling like they're in an experimental part of their life cycle, right? They're in a spot where we've got these established veterans. Let's go out and win these games. Whereas if you're, Anaheim or whatever, you can do whatever the heck you want. It doesn't really matter. So I think what we don't usually see with this team is boldness like that, generally, in terms of lineup decisions. The thing is, we'll never know unless we see it, right? And if it sucks, then you don't do it anymore, right? And you move down to line 3. But I'm curious to see it. I would worry a little bit about the conditioning.
Last question for you, Christian, and we'll let you get on with your Saturday morning and the Wiener dogs and the cat and everything. Why do you think that Logan Stanley continues to get that leash? Is it because you say big? Is that what you said?
I don't know if you knew this, Drew, but he's 6'7".
I'm aware of that, but I mean, and everyone's saying it and has been saying it for years that, tongue in cheek and a little bit of a joke. But for a Jets team that certainly isn't big on the back end, it's almost like they're just trying to make up for it by trying to force Logan Stanley to be a regular when he's just not. There's just not enough to his game. And I know that I don't mean to be, particularly harsh or particularly critical of him, but you just see that when the going gets tough, when he has to play against elevated competition, he just doesn't have the skill set necessary to be an NHL regular against those really good players.
The last number of years I've thought of Logan Stanley as a decent option as a 7th guy.
Yeah.
But that's where I thought the ceiling was, because we've seen him come in and sometimes you can spark things with a hit or a fight, but there's too many giveaways. There's too many bad penalties, lost coverage. They have to play him very sheltered. And he's one of the big things he's known for. I think he's miscast a bit as this big guy, because the number one thing he's kind of got is this shot that gets through, doesn't go in almost ever, right? But he's got a hard shot. But you look at any of the advanced metrics too, and even penalty killing, right? We think of him, he can kill penalty minutes. The penalty kill with him on the ice, I saw a heat map last night from Hockey Viz. It's not very good, right? So you look at all the evidence that we've seen eye test wise, analytic wise, and we just look at him and say, like if he was 6'4" or 6'3", would he still be in this organization, right? So
I think he would also be shorter than you, because I think you're 6'5", right?
I'm 6'5". Yeah, he's one of the guys that I have to look up a tiny bit. Him and Tyler Myers are always the guys like, oh, you're pretty tall. Wow. But
can you skate backwards?
Yeah, I can. Not super great. I was in the lowest. I took the year off hockey this year, but I was in the lowest division at the Highlander for the last number of years, playing defense for the Johnny Come Latelys. But I look at Stanley and I wonder, like, I think this is it, right? I think this is all he's going to be. And I don't think that's good enough for this team to put him in over someone like a Heinola, because we know what Stanley is. We still don't really know what Heinola is, I don't think.
Agreed. Christian Amell, 680 CJOB. Great appearance this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to your continued analysis on the Superstation, the Jets, and the Dallas Stars tomorrow afternoon. It'll be another Central Division matchup as the Jets look to wrap up this road trip in their winning ways. Get on with your day, Christian. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Go, Christian.
Pleasure. There you go. It's Christian Amell joining us.
Love
There's
that
the
jersey.
Wiener Dogs.
Beauty.
It's a great jersey right there. Christian Amell joining us this morning. Great beauty jersey. Great beauty, Christian, is as well. When we come back on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, more on the Winnipeg Jets. We'll talk about the defense moving forward. After, we saw the lineup changes yesterday, we will opine on that as well. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg. It's a Saturday morning, the Illegal Curve Hockey Show, presented by Play Now. Rolls right on.
We want to thank you for not betting with Play Now and choosing our illegal gambling Because we couldn't afford things like this without your money.
So much of your money.
Now, you might have questions like,
Do our profits benefit your community?
No.
Or bet with Play Now, Manitoba's local legal and secure gambling site.
Dining, entertainment, parking, and convenience, all in one spot. City Place is located in the heart of downtown Winnipeg, attached to the Canada Life Centre. Whether you're working, living, or out for a night in the downtown, make City Place your go-to destination before or after the fun finds you. Lunchtime, game time, anytime, visit City Place at 333 St. Mary Avenue, next to Canada Life Centre. Holt Dental, the new official dentist of Illegal Curve, has a philosophy rooted in two unyielding principles: genuinely caring about patients and providing outstanding service. Being a patient of Holt Dental means more than just checkups and treatments. It's taking the time to listen and talk to each patient so they can achieve the best long-term health, functionality, and aesthetics for their teeth, mouth, and gums. Conveniently located at Grant Park Festival on Taylor Avenue, Holt Dental is dentistry of the highest quality in a comfortable and relaxed environment. For more information, visit holtdental.ca. Oh, and there's plenty of free parking at the front door, too. Celebrating its 40th year as Winnipeg's home for stand-up comedy, Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club has recently been named Canada's top comedy club and a top 5 comedy club in North America. From birthday parties to date nights to fundraisers and everything in between, Rumors is your destination for the best and most affordable live entertainment Winnipeg has to offer. For more information on upcoming shows, Rumors' incredible promotions, and to purchase tickets, visit rumorscomedyclub.com.
So you're a pizza person, you married a wing person, but somehow your kids are salad people. You can't pick your fam, but you can pick your BP meal deal. Starting from $18.99 for takeout or delivery at bostonpizza.com.
Always great to catch up with Christian Amell. Great appearance this morning on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. Drew Mandel, Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg with you talking about the Winnipeg Jets, just like we did last night and just like we'll do tomorrow night after the Jets and the Dallas Stars do action. As you all well know, the place to be on Saturday mornings, the place to be after each and every Winnipeg Jets game is the Illegal Curve YouTube channel. So while you're here, be sure to subscribe, smash the like button, and tell your friends, tell your family. The best place to be is this fine channel. And of course, the podcast edition of the show, which will be available shortly after it concludes. Spent a lot of time so far on the forward group for the Winnipeg Jets. Now we talk about the defensive group for the Jets, as apparently Dylan Coghlan is now a regular option after last night's performance against the Vegas Golden Knights, where he definitely acquitted himself perfectly fine as a depth defenseman for the Jets. Colin Miller, Ville Heinola out of the lineup. Logan Stanley, Dylan Coghlan into the lineup. Hayden Fleury still in the lineup. We know that the untouchables, from my perspective, are Morrissey, DeMello, and Neil Pionk. But the other three defensive positions right now for the Winnipeg Jets, I would say, are very much in flux. So who are the 6 defensemen playing for the Winnipeg Jets tomorrow afternoon against the Dallas Stars? Ezra Ginsburg.
Yeah, well, we already touched on this. I mean, you're either putting Ville Heinola in and you're keeping Dylan Coghlan on the right side, or you're putting both Ville Heinola and Colin Miller back in the lineup. I don't think anybody's expecting Logan Stanley. It would, put it this way, it would be a surprise based on how he played against Vegas if Logan Stanley remains in the lineup, right? And that was the curious decision, right? Like, I think, we talked about it on last night's post-game show. Eric Comrie getting the start was maybe a bit of a surprise to some, but we thought he might play 2 games on the 6-game road trip based on the fact there was a back-to-back, right? Which obviously Comrie played against Nashville. But that's really the question here. I agree with you, Drew. Hayden Fleury is not coming out of the lineup. He's been a staple. At least that's not really where the smart bet would be. Hayden Fleury come out of the lineup. When I look at this D group as a whole, that to me is probably my biggest concern, is that Stamberg's out of the lineup for the foreseeable future. We don't know exactly how long he's going to be out for, but we know it's weeks, not days. And Hayden Fleury now is in a top 4 role. So you're now taking a guy who's playing 12 to 14 minutes and you're asking him to play 18 to 20 minutes or 22 minutes, right? And I think, going back to what we were talking about with Logan Stanley, I think Logan Stanley, when you play him against lesser competition, some of the weaker teams in the NHL, so whether that's the Predators at this point, but I mean teams get like the Sharks or the Ducks or the Blackhawks, teams like that. I think he doesn't get exposed as much as he does against a deeper team like the Vegas Golden Knights, or for that matter, a good LA Kings team or a Dallas Stars team. And I think that's why, for me, Logan Stanley really isn't an option right now, because I think you have better options, Ville Heinola. So I think, Heinola, I think he definitely, didn't have as good a game against the LA Kings as opposed to his first game. So I expect Heinola to go back into the lineup. But I think looking at, to me, it's not just about the third pair. The third pair isn't going to determine the Jets' short-term or medium-term success, or long-term success for that matter. But right now, I mean, we've seen the depth tested without Dylan Samberg in the lineup. I mean, the Jets, it's not like last year when you had Brendan Dillon as your second pair defenseman and Dylan Samberg, you had this ready-made option on the third pair ready to step up in the second pair. Now Hayden Fleury, who, let's be honest, he's been kind of an NHL, AHL tweener for the most, and I think he's done okay. I think Fleury gives, he's a guy that's got almost 300 games of NHL experience. So obviously the reason why I bring that up is because this isn't a guy who's only had a cup of coffee in the NHL. He's a veteran NHL defenseman. So for the most part, you get exactly what you expect. You get a reliable defenseman. So I think that to me is the bigger concern is, going forward. And yes, sure, after this road trip, the Jets' schedule gets a little bit easier here. St. Louis, I mean, they're not the easiest team. Buffalo's playing some good hockey, but after that, you've got Chicago, Columbus. After the Bruins in Vegas, you've got Montreal. So the schedule does get a little bit easier here, but still, that's to me what I'm looking at is, can Fleury give you enough as a second pairing left shot defenseman? Or like Drew said, I mean, is Heinola an option there? And I think, if Ville Heinola was 19 years old, you would hesitate a little bit. Ville Heinola is 23 years old at this point. He's a guy who's played a lot in the American Hockey League, but not a lot in the NHL. And to me, that's what I'm going to have my eye on, is Heinola going to be asked to play a top 4 role at some point in the next month?
So, Dave, what about that? Hayden Fleury has almost by default ended up in that second pairing left side role, especially since the Samberg injury. Just the nature of the timing for that made it seem like he was, he gets that opportunity. Do you leave that alone, or is that also an option of something you can maybe look at switching around as Scott Arniel is trying to piecemeal this defensive core together besides DeMello, Morrissey, and Pionk?
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. Fleury's become a lot more noticeable, and not for good reasons,
right,
in that elevated role. And that's the problem. I mean, we highlighted him at least twice yesterday in goals against, and that, for the first part, when he was in that third pairing role, we didn't really mention him that much. He was playing probably, like I said, where he needs to play in the NHL. I think you're just asking too much of a guy. Now, the problem is, as the problem was going to be when they only gave Ville Heinola, I understand why they did it, but when they only gave Ville Heinola the 2 games with the Moose, like I said, I watched him. I thought he was okay, but to me, it was a conditioning issue. And I thought being thrown into the fire at the NHL level isn't ideal. And, he acquitted himself well enough in the first game, I guess, in Minnesota. But yeah, I mean, he didn't have I don't think he got torched against in LA. I just, he had an okay game. I just was concerned about, trying to get him, going again, getting his legs at the NHL level. Whereas, again, if you could have given him another week with the Moose, he would have practiced with the Moose. Again, I understand it's practice as opposed to playing games, and they would have gotten 2 more games in, and then he could have gone up and maybe had a little bit better of a ready to go, because he had been practicing already skating.
Hit the ground
like he told
running,
us.
hit the ice running, skating a little faster.
Well, he had already told us that he'd been skating for a month, so we understood that. But it's one thing to be skating, it's another thing to be doing drills, another thing to be playing games. And I just thought 4 games with the Moose There's a reason why they allow you to have 2 weeks of conditioning. I just think for Ville Heinola, it would have been better to give him the full 2 weeks, let him get there. I mean, again, if necessity suggests you need him, then you bring him up. But I just think like it's asking a lot of him, as Christian said, to ask him to throw him into that role of eating those types of minutes, which I think if he was healthy, then maybe then it's not as much a problem. I mean, if he would have started on the third pair behind Samberg, played this whole time in a pairing with Colin Miller, then I don't even think it's a question. I think he and Pionk could have probably worked well together. But now the concern is you've got a guy who's really not necessarily up to speed. He's behind, it's November, so he's at least a full month behind everybody else, in addition to all the other time he missed, right? He missed training camp. So really he's 2 months behind everybody. So that's a problem because, again, I just look at Fleury and it's like these Band-Aids that you're putting on your team because I just don't think he's good enough to play, quite honestly, in a second pairing role on a team. Like, again, can he do it as a stopgap? But Dylan Samberg isn't going to be out for just a short period of time. That's the concern, right? You know that it's going to be a bit longer term with him. So the question becomes, what are you going to do? And look, we know Logan Stanley isn't the answer. Now, could you ask Coghlan to play on his opposite side and maybe try and do that because he's got more experience and maybe, look, we liked what we saw, but everybody always likes the shiny new toy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's,
and it's one game, again, one game against sheltered competition, most players can look decent. They're not going to look like absolute tire fires, generally speaking, in a one game small sample where you're playing them the softest minutes you possibly can. The problem for the Winnipeg Jets right now is they need somebody who's going to play some harder minutes on that left side. You can't shelter second pair defensemen. It's just not something you can do.
Or you play Josh Morrissey 35 minutes a game.
Right. That's your only option. So if you want to really shelter everybody is you play Morrissey 35 minutes a game, which is not going to be what I would describe as a long-term recipe for success. So you need somebody to come up and take that left side role next to Neil Pionk. Hayden Fleury has had the shot for the last week. And the more you see of him in that role, the less you like him in that role. It's just not where everybody in life has their ceiling. Not everybody is going to be an all-star at everything. So to expect it is not realistic. It's not an insult. It's just reality. So the question from the Jets' perspective and the question from Scott Arniel's perspective is who is next up to try in that spot? And I don't understand why it shouldn't be Ville Heinola. It seems like you have to give him that opportunity. You have to see what you have against Neil Pionk there, because to your point, unless you're going out into the trade market and trading all of a sudden for a bona fide top 4 left side defenseman to fill in this gap until Samberg is back, which, by the way, the Jets aren't doing, you need to find that internal option. Hayden Fleury hasn't looked great. Logan Stanley, we know, can't do that. So by default, who's next up? It has to be Ville Heinola, and I would like to see it probably start Sunday against the Dallas Stars, Ezzy.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much we're going to belabor the point here. I think we all agree that, Hayden Fleury is a little bit overmatched in a second pairing role, and Ville Heinola is the obvious one. I don't think that there's much more, we've been talking about it for 10 minutes here. I'm not sure how much more we can talk about it, but I think that, he's obviously the guy that has the skill set, the puck moving ability, the offensive upside, the IQ. Everybody knows that. I mean, he's the obvious one. You just took him out of the lineup, though, against a Vegas Golden Knights team that obviously was better than the Jets last night, even though it was a close game. So I think that, there's that to monitor. Like, how much confidence do they have in him right now to take him out of the lineup after only 2 games? Like I said, I think, he was a little bit shaky against the LA Kings, but then again, how many players were good against the LA Kings? They only mustered 14 shots on net, right? So, yeah, I think, if you're looking for, a different combination, and look, I don't think Fleury has been awful. I don't think any of us are saying that. I think he's been okay. But I think when you're looking at this Jets team, just stepping back from the defense here, just looking at this team as a whole, I mean, this road trip has been a bit of a disaster, guys. Let's be honest here. Like, it started off okay, but like, you've lost Samberg and you're in danger of going 2-4 on this road trip. Now, I'm not saying, like, the Jets are 18-6, so we can't lose fact of that start, but like, how long are we going to keep pointing to, hey, remember when the Jets went 15-1? Hockey is very much, what have you done for me lately, and how are you playing lately, right? So like if the Jets lose another game here, they're going to be 18-7, right? So you keep chipping away, you keep losing games. All of a sudden that incredible record isn't looking as incredible, even though I've said this before, the Jets could lose another 3 games and they're 18-10 or 18-9 or 18-10, whatever. And, it's still an incredible start to the season. But yeah, I mean, right now, Drew, the top 4 is a bit of a mystery in terms of which player is going to step up into the lineup and provide you with the type of play that you need. And Heinola probably is that guy. But again, I mean, there's other issues on this team right now. They're having trouble scoring goals, and they're not playing the same way defensively in front of Hellebuck and Comrie. That's the bigger concern to me, not who's going to just step up into the left side top pair role.
To me, respectfully, I disagree. I think that's the biggest question right now is who's going to play that role.
I didn't say it wasn't the biggest question. I'm saying there's other problems with this team right now aside from that.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, they're not operating on clicking on all cylinders. I would agree with that there. But to me, it seems like the Jets themselves, the organization themselves, the coaching staff themselves, Dave, don't really know what their approach is. Trying Hayden Fleury there, I get. I understand that, he'd been, he played decently on that third pairing, so far with Colin Miller for a lot of this year, especially when after Logan Stanley went injured and Hayden Fleury got back in the lineup. So I get, that attempt, but to me, it seems like the coaching staff themselves are a little bit at loss for how to move this defensive core forward without Dylan Samberg being an option, probably for the next, a broken foot. Let's assume it's a 4 to 6 week injury, which is likely in and around the time frame. So guess what? That's another 5 weeks. You're looking until, let's say mid-January without having a key member of your top 4 of your defense in your lineup, and nobody within the roster, within the Jets, brain trust seems to know who's going to step up and be able to fill that role, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I put the comment up by Dietermeister. I mean, you could always move DeMello to play with Heinola, and you could put Pionk up with Morrissey, and you could try and make some, as opposed to try and even things out a little bit. And then you have someone who's steady, although DeMello's had some rough points this year. So look, I think it's an issue that speaks to the long-term goals of this team. I think that's kind of what you have to focus on, not the winning games. Because as he's right, this team has built up such a significant, sorry, I'm trying to think of the word, but like not a gap, but they've given themselves such a boost to be in the standings bank runway that you don't have to really worry about the next 3, 4, 5 games. Of course, you have to focus on them. I think the reason why Comrie went into the net was because they wanted Hellebuck against divisional opponents like St. Louis and Dallas. But I just think that it speaks to the long term because look, in the playoffs, boys, you can have one injury that could derail your whole playoffs. And we've seen it with this Jets team too many times before, right? When Mark Scheifele got hurt, when Josh Morrissey got hurt, Nikolai Ehlers gets hurt. Too many times, one guy shouldn't derail your whole team. Now, of course, when it's your best player, but it's a team game. It's not like basketball where you have one player who can really kind of set the tone and drag everybody along. You need to have some depth. And, one of the things we talk about with the Jets club is the depth, and you're not seeing it on that back end. So look, my inclination from a Jets coaching staff, I don't love it for Ville because of what's, the reality of his conditioning from the Moose, from the injury, but maybe he is an option. Maybe you, to be honest with you, maybe you hybridize it and you throw him in periodically with Pionk. You get him a little more minutes, so you get him up to speed a little quicker and that sort of thing. But we'll see. Again, like I said, to me, I would give him a little runway because I think, as to the point Christian made on our show, half an hour ago, you need to kind of know what you have in this player and give him that runway.
You know who would have been a great option for the Jets in this instance? A guy playing not that far from us in Minnesota, Declan Chisholm, that the Jets lost for nothing to hold on to a guy in Logan Stanley that they knew where his ceiling is at and that he couldn't play in this role. So, I do think that, and what's been done is done, but I don't think that we should gloss over the fact that a guy like Declan Chisholm, who the Jets drafted, who the Jets developed, would certainly be a reasonable option for the team right now had the team not mismanaged that asset and lost him in order to hold on to to keep the Logan Stanley experiment going, which is not obviously going well at this point in time and is unlikely to end well. So I did want to bring that up as just as we're all praising Kevin Cheveldayoff, justifiably so, for the great trade of Pierre-Luc Dubois, but it's not fair to praise there and gloss over the significant error that was losing Declan Chisholm for nothing.
Johnny Kovacevic as well.
Yeah, but Johnny Kovacevic is playing, okay, yes, him as well. But
he's actually playing more often, I think, than Chisholm right now, regularly with the Devils. So
yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, both of those are mistakes, are player personnel mistakes that the Jets have made, and now we're trying to scramble to find out, options to make up for that error, and that's something, unfortunately, that the Jets are going to have to try and work through over the coming weeks and coming days without Dylan Samberg in their lineup. They're going to, of course, have to focus on that tomorrow afternoon against the Dallas Stars. The Jets and the Stars. It's a 3:30 Central Time puck drop, if I'm not mistaken, which means post game is going to be right around 6 o'clock. So it's going to be dinner with the curve, if you will, as the Jets and the Stars will do battle, and then we'll break it all down on the Illegal Curve post game show tomorrow evening to see if the Jets can salvage a 500 record on this road trip, which, by the way, if they can, I think is an impressive victory when they're up against it tomorrow night, Ezzy.
If they can finish the road trip 500?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think at this point, I don't think it's been a success. I don't think I would call that a successful road trip, but I think that you would still take it, put it that way.
Salvaging it at that point in time.
Yeah, exactly. So, I would say so, yeah.
Okay. Gentlemen, I'm going to bid you adieu. I have a family affair I must head to. I'm involved in a wedding all this weekend. So I'm going to turn over the show to the two of you for the remainder of the next final 30 minutes. And I'm sure as a result, the show is going to get exponentially better than it has for the last 90 minutes. But in that case, I wish you all the best on this Saturday morning. I wish everyone else the best on this Saturday morning as well. We'll go to break. When we come back, I won't be here. That's why Dave Minuk, Ezra Ginsburg will drive this bus home for the final 30 minutes. Have a great Saturday, everybody. Stay tuned for more of the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
Welcome back to a much better Illegal Curve Hockey Show because it's cleaner. There's myself, Dave Minuk. There's my main man, Ezzy Ginsburg. No Mindell. This is the no Mindell half an hour, Ezzy. We've gotten rid of the dead weight. We're ready to keep this rolling. Talking about the Winnipeg Jets, talking about some other Jets-related news and tidbits. But as we really should preview this game against the Dallas Stars because it's not going to get any easier for the Winnipeg Jets when they go into Dallas, a Dallas team that is trying to push to get back into the top of the Central with the Colorado Avalanche after Minnesota and Winnipeg built such a good kind of spot for themselves by getting off to such red hot starts. But from your perspective, like what have you seen from Dallas? I know I'm not asking you to analyze them in the sense that you've watched them a lot because obviously you haven't, but just, what have you seen from Dallas that has put them where they are in the Central standings right now?
Yeah, well, they're coming off of a couple pretty stinky losses versus the Chicago Blackhawks and the Carolina Hurricanes. They gave up 12 goals in those two games, and then they responded, obviously, with a big 5-3 win over the Colorado Avalanche.
Mm-hmm.
That was last night, right? And, I mean, this Stars team, I think we all know how much star power the Dallas Stars have. And what's been kind of, the biggest surprise to me just watching them from afar is – Jake Ottinger's struggle, and obviously we expect Ottinger to be one of the goalies for Team USA at the Four Nations tournament. But also, they've struggled, at times to score goals, and obviously not against the Colorado Avalanche. But you look at like Jason Robertson's got 5 goals in 22 games, for example. Like that's not the type of numbers you're expecting from a superstar like Robertson, right? Matt Duchene obviously is over a point per game. I think he's at 27 points in 22 games. Mason Marchment's also off to a good start, point per game. We don't have to go through the entire lineup here, but they're a deep lineup and obviously a good defensive team. So, you're expecting, this is going to be a difficult test for the Jets. Obviously, most of the road trip has been difficult, but the Dallas Stars, they're still pushing to get into, I think they're 8 points back of the Jets now.
Yeah.
but obviously, this team has, they've kind of given us exactly what we expect from them. Good special teams. I think actually their penalty kill struggled a little bit, but their power play, I believe, is top 10 in the league. So I think, it's been, I think when you put the Jets record up against any team really at this point, it doesn't look that good, but the Stars still have a pretty damn good record. And obviously well coached. So, I expect Jake Ottinger to get the start again tomorrow, and it's going to be a premier American goalie matchup between Hellebuyck and Ottinger. But I mean, this is a still, even though, we mentioned Ottinger, and obviously, we should mention the trade that Drew broke in the first half an hour of the show, Scott Wedgwood being traded for Justus Annunen. And pardon me, that was not Dallas Stars related trade. Scott Wedgwood used to be on the Dallas Stars. Pardon me. That was between the Nashville Predators and the Colorado Avalanche, but still an in-division trade nonetheless. Yep. But you look at Casey DeSmith, he struggled at times as well. And, that's the staple of the Dallas Stars. That's something that, they don't have the luxury of having a guy like Connor Hellebuyck, who's Mr. Goal Save above expected, right? So I think the Dallas Stars, I still think at the end of the day, they're going to be, a top 3 team in the Central, and they're going to be a team that you don't want to play in the playoffs. But certainly, the Jets are going to have to be a lot better in their own zone. That's something that we talked about a lot on last night's post-game show. They're having a little bit of trouble in their own zone with turnovers and everything like that. So you're going to have to be sharper. From my recent memory, the Jets have always, had difficulty in American Airlines Arena.
Yeah, not an easy place for them to play. And, it's interesting because Dallas is having success. And you do wonder, and I'm curious your thoughts, does the game with Jake Ottinger getting pulled in Winnipeg, does that factor into his desire? Like, are we going to see Jake Ottinger out of his mind tomorrow just because of how things went, with folks in Winnipeg chanting, U.S. backup at him? So it'd be curious also whether the Dallas fans, maybe there'll be some furries, because that's our first experience, of course, was back in the day in Dallas. But, you do wonder if that plays a role, because you're right, it's going to be a premier goaltending matchup. And, Connor Hellebuyck is going to want to have another. He knows, at the end of the day, Connor Hellebuyck is still going to be the best player on this Winnipeg Jets team. Doesn't matter, from what, regardless of position, he's the best player. He's the most important player. He's the team MVP when he's on the ice. And you do wonder, with how focused he is and knowing how important this game is, it's an afternoon game, which, as you've always mentioned that he likes to play. So you do think about all those things that factor in, and it just kind of adds to this importance. And look, this is, as you said, Ezzy, this is a road trip that has been unsuccessful in the sense that you're not, like, you stole a game. Connor Hellebuyck stole the game in Minnesota, but really that should have been a loss. Shouldn't have been a win, because Minnesota outplayed you for the most part. You get the 2 points, but you're 2-3-0, and you also lost Dylan Sandberg. So I just think that there's going to be a lot on the Jets to kind of clean up their game, to simplify their game, to get out of those mistakes. I mean, regardless of whether Nikolai Ehlers is in the lineup or not, which we don't expect, obviously, this team needs to play better, because, again, like I said, there's a lot of little mistakes that are happening right now that we haven't seen from this team. And I just think that a Dallas team that is incentivized after being embarrassed by the Jets in Winnipeg, and I don't know if teams hold on to that kind of stuff. Like we ask, I'll be honest with you, I really don't think they do. I mean, the goaltenders may, but I can't tell you how many times I've talked to players and they'll be like, yeah, the goalie. I'm like, you don't know the name of Jake Ottinger? You know what I mean? Like, it's almost like they don't know who their opponent is that night, let alone someone they played 3 weeks ago. So I just look at it as, again, it's just two teams that are needing the as you said, Chicago, they lost to Chicago. They're not happy. They beat Colorado. I was reading a little bit of Mike Heika's report when we had him on, but he, of course, covers the Dallas Stars. And he was just talking about how Pete DeBoer was happier with the way, his 4 lines were rolling. But it's interesting just to see even a guy like Jason Robertson isn't scoring. I mean, Jets fans always know, because Jason Robertson always has good games against the Jets. But, I think he's only got 5 goals this season. And so there's some guys who just aren't producing. Wyatt Johnston, he's a phenomenal young player. He's only got 3 goals. So it's just from that perspective that you look at the Dallas Stars and they're not necessarily getting as much contributions, but I think it's kind of like the way of the NHL right now, as teams are having, like, it's unusual what Winnipeg and Minnesota have done. I think it's more par for the course where teams are having, like look at LA. LA was having good games, but they were kind of hit or miss. Then they get pumped by San Jose. Then they destroy the Jets. And then I know they won again yesterday. So it's just kind of the way the NHL is going right now. But ultimately, if you look at this Dallas team, which is the focus of this segment, is just the fact that you've got a team that is going to be hungry, I think, for 2 points tomorrow against the Jets.
Yeah, it was a 4-1 score. I'm not sure if you mentioned that
Nope.
the game in Winnipeg, and it was a dominant Jets performance. I think everybody was expecting a little bit tighter of a game. If I remember correctly, the Jets probably could have had a couple more goals in that game. And to your point, right? Like we mentioned it, Robertson and Wyatt Johnston aren't quite putting up the numbers that we expected them to based on last year, but just going down like the lineup to the third line, like you've got Maverick Bourque centering Jamie Benn and Evgeny Dadonov. Like both Ben and Dadonov, obviously Maverick Bourque is a rookie coming off a really good year with the Texas Stars in the AHL, but like these are guys, and that's similar to the Jets, right? Like you could have a guy like Nino Niederreiter playing on your second line, or Alex Iafallo on your fourth line could easily be a third line guy, right? Like that's the staple of good teams. They're deep. And, the Ehlers injury is significant. Like I mentioned this earlier, if there's one guy that you don't want out of the lineup, to end this road trip, it's Nick Ehlers. Obviously, Scheifele and Connor would be up there as well, or Velarde for that matter. And obviously, we haven't touched a ton on this, but, Cole Perfetti, breaking the goalless drought with 2 goals, I think is significant, especially with Ehlers' injury, that he's got the confidence. So obviously they're going to rely heavily on that second line. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, do we see the Scheifele line up against the Hintz line? Obviously, if the Jets, I think, had their way, we know that the Lowry line would be the line that they'd want to shut down. But then Marchment, Duchesne, and Seguin, I mean, that's kind of like 1A, 1B, right? Like they're tough. So I'm not saying that the Jets can't win this game, but I mean, no Samberg and now no Ehlers, so you're not at your peak. And so the Jets are starting to get hit by that injury bug, right? Like we haven't talked about it a ton. You had injuries to Heinola and Stanley on the back end, but for the most part, I mean, night in and night out, the Jets had this exact same lineup, right? Like Absolutely. Dave, like you post the Jets previews, Jets game day previews every day on the site, and it was almost like automatic. Like you knew 16
straight games as the same.
There you go. Like that's significant. 16 straight games with the exact same lineup, and that's, I think, a big part of the Jets' success was that they had 4 lines rolling. Their defense was playing really solid. Obviously, Hellebuck is going to give you Vezina quality goaltending. I mean, he's going to have a bad game here and there, but for the most part, he's going to be one of the best goalies in the league, if not the best goalie in the league. And now you're starting to face, I think, your first real adversity of the year, right? Like we talked about the second D pair quite a bit last segment when Drew was still on the show. I think going forward, that's something to be concerned about. But I think also you have to be concerned about, you've got Scheifele dealing with an injury, now playing on the wing as opposed to center. And now you've got uncertainty with Ehlers' health. And it's possible he only misses 1 game and he's back next Tuesday versus St. Louis. We don't know. I mean, it was a very innocuous looking situation, I would say, right, Dave?
Absolutely.
Like we don't really know. Like he got tangled up. I forget who he got tangled up with on the Vegas Golden Knights. Doesn't matter, but it was kind of like we were kind of speculating. Was it an ankle? Was it a knee thing? Was it a groin thing? Like it's really hard to play the guessing game. But regardless, I mean, now you're starting to deal with some very significant injuries. You're talking about, a second line winger, a second line defenseman. And, I really wonder, is this when Chevy goes waiver wire hunting, right? Like, is this when he goes and tries to make a move here? Because Samberg is going to be out for at least another, 2 or 3 weeks? You got to think maybe a month
more, I think,
after that block shot, right? On the Steven Stamkos shot. And then, Ehlers, if he's out any significant amount of time, especially with like Scheifele, Connor, Velarde, I think have played well. I think I was getting a little bit of pushback in the chat there. Like, I still think Kyle Connor is playing at a very elite level. Obviously, he could be scoring a few more goals on this road trip. Let's be honest here. He's mainly getting assists, but these are things that the Jets are going to have to battle through. So I think tomorrow afternoon, you're going to see a game where the Jets are going to just try to do anything to squeeze out 2 points. Like, this is going to be a tough one, I think, for the Jets. Again, I'm not going to make a prediction, Dave, and say, this is going to be a low-scoring game, or, the Jets are going to lose this game or win this game. I'm not going to say anything, but I think just when you factor everything in, last game of a road trip, and you've got some uncertainty with the Ehlers situation, most likely he's not going to play, and then you have a D group who's kind of now they're trying to find their identity a little bit, right? You've got some different bodies coming in and out. Heinola had varying degrees of success. I do think Heinola is going to go back into the lineup tomorrow. In terms of Dylan Coghlan versus Colin Miller, I'm kind of leaning towards going back to Colin Miller, but we'll see what happens there. Dylan Coghlan, just quickly, I think, the fact that he would be able to go into the lineup and play pretty solid for his first NHL game of the year, I think is promising.
Yeah.
Could he be an option on the offside? We'll see. Scott Arniel does have options there, but for now, I think, this game coming up against Dallas, it's not going to be easy for the Jets to leave that building with 2 points.
No, it was Dora 5, by the way, who the Vegas Golden Knights player who Ehlers tried to take out with a hit and then got taken out himself by him, unfortunately for himself and the Jets. But yeah, I mean, without belaboring it, as I think that it's going to be a kind of a, can you pick up your boots? Can you get ready for this game? Because it's going to have to be all hands on deck. I mean, when you're a wounded animal, you have to play as such. And, this Jets team has to understand the limitations now, as you've listed, and I don't need to reiterate them, but I will just quickly, with Mark Scheifele's hampering, with Nikolai Ehlers potentially out of the lineup, with Dylan Samberg out of the lineup, you are not the team that you were 2 weeks ago. Now, The truth is, at the end of the day, no team goes through 82 games in a season and is healthy. Vegas didn't have Mark Stone, guys. Like, let's remember, that's their best player, or maybe you could argue Jack Eichel, but one of their best players wasn't in the lineup.
Probably best all-around player. Yeah.
Right. I'd say best two-way player for sure. Right. They didn't have Zach Whitecloud in the lineup. So Vegas was dealing with injuries. Every team deals with injuries, especially at this point of the season, and especially with a condensed schedule. That's, something that also has to be taken into consideration because of this Four Nations thing. So that's part of the reality for Winnipeg Jets, is that last year you got exceptionally lucky in that your D core was healthy the entirety of the year. This year, not so much. You're dealing with adversity, but that's just the reality of playing hockey. As you don't have any other options. You can't be like, well, like every team has to deal with it. Like the Oilers lost Connor McDavid. They didn't lose him for as long as they thought they were going to, but every team does it. So it's not that.
Well, another example is the Toronto Maple Leafs with Austin Matthews. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the record was 6-3-1 or 7-3 without Austin Matthews in the lineup for 10 games. I believe he is scheduled to come back tonight against Tampa Bay. But yeah, to your point, Dave, like the type of luck, if you want to call it that, or just the type of consistency that they had last year with not really having any major injuries on the back end. I mean, it's tested. And I think, Chevy deserves a lot of credit for bringing in Hayden Fleury and Dylan Coghlan, because I think these guys were underrated signings in terms of just stockpiling the depth. But I think we're starting to see that left side, unless you're going like Ville Heinola is the key here. He really is the key. And again, I we've talked about it a lot here. We're an hour and 45 minutes into the show here, and we've talked a lot about it, but really, like, it seems like you could have, we probably had this conversation a couple of years ago, Dave, at this point, but it is time in this situation for me to have him in the lineup.
Yeah.
And even if he makes a mistake or two in game, keep him in the lineup, because I think last year, you remember, there was a brief period where you saw Dylan Samberg and Neil Pionk together, and they were really good together. And I'm not saying that Ville Heinola is Dylan Samberg, but what I'm saying is, like, at 23 years old and with all of his pro experience with the Manitoba Moose, we know he can play in an elevated role, right? Like you always talk about it. He goes out there, plays top pair, first power play, everything like that. Like, I don't think you're throwing a guy into the fire. I'm not saying that you play him second pair against Dallas, Dave, but I'm saying at some point here in the next, 2 to 3 weeks, I think you got to try him out on that second pair left side. I really do. And I think that's the key. And he could become, he could kind of stabilize this defense a little bit. Neil Pionk is having a great year. I'm not worried about Neil Pionk. I think Heinola and Pionk would form a good pair. And if you're worried that pair, might have trouble in their own zone or anything like that, yeah. I mean, that situation that you brought up earlier, maybe you go Josh Morrissey, Neil Pionk on the top pair, and then you've got Dylan DeMello, who's obviously a stabilizing defensive force on the right side. I mean, you do have options here, but unless you're going to, dip into the waiver wire, I don't even know if anybody's out there that's suitable, or if you're going to make a move here.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about it. Colorado and Nashville made a trade swapping goalies, even though I forgot that it wasn't Dallas because Scott Wedgwood was on the Stars for a few years. But regardless, I mean, I think you got to go with that, don't you? I mean, this is time. I mean, you have drafted and developed Ville Heinola for this exact reason, right? For him, like, I don't think his ceiling is a third pairing defenseman. So I think you give him a little runway on the second pair.
Well, look, if you can't do it now, when are you ever going to do it? And if you can't, I don't know if maybe it was Drew who said it, and I don't tend to disagree, although I don't like to agree with Drew, but to me, it's one of those situations where it's like, everyone can say, you can't do this. You can't do this. How do you know? Like, with all due respect to everyone in the chat and everyone who's commenting, everyone's entitled to an opinion, but I will tell you right now, a few years ago in the playoffs against Milwaukee, Ville Heinola was in the playoffs for the Moose. Dylan Sandberg was in the playoffs for the Moose. Declan Chisholm was in the playoffs for the Moose, and Johnny Kovacevic was in the playoffs for the Moose. The best of the four was Declan Chisholm. It's not even a question. I watched the games. Declan Chisholm was better than all four of those. The three other guys. Does that make Declan Chisholm better than Dylan Sandberg right now? No, I would take Dylan Sandberg over Declan Chisholm. But my point is that Dylan Sandberg at that time, I would have looked at him and said, okay, well, he was good. I could see what the Jets liked in him, but in the playoffs, like I said, I thought Chisholm was the best. All I'm saying is you have to see what you have in Ville Heinola. There's no point not to. You know what you have in Logan Stanley. And I don't want to belabor the point, I'm just going to say that I would tend to agree with you that now is the chance. See what you've got. And again, if you need to mix and match DeMello and Pionk to give him that stabilizing force, I'd be all for that, quite frankly, because I think you just want to see, okay, we're going to give this guy a little bit of runway. Now we're going to find out. And then if you're Kevin Cheveldayoff, it allows you to evaluate your group, and you can say, okay, potentially when Dylan Sandberg comes back, we can put Heinola down to our third pairing and feel comfortable with him. Or, you know what? We're not comfortable with Heinola. We're not comfortable with Fleury. We're not comfortable with Stanley. I got to make a trade to make this group deeper. So if I lose a guy, I'm going to be able to say, well, we lost him, but we've got player X who's coming in now and is going to be ready to take that jump.
And I do think we're going to see that at some point. I really do. And this is not a knock on Hayden Fleury, but I think, how old is Hayden Fleury, Dave? 27, 28 years old. At this point, I think we know that his ceiling at the NHL level is a third pairing defenseman, right? The eye test and the analytics back it up, right? Like there weren't teams clamoring, to offer Hayden Fleury a 5-year deal to be their second pairing defenseman, right? It just that's just not. And again, I'm not being disrespectful to Hayden Fleury or anything like that, but that's just what he is at this point in his career. He's a third pairing guy. So I think we will see Heinola be given some runway as a second pairing defenseman. It might not happen tomorrow afternoon versus Dallas. Maybe it does. We don't know. I mean, at this point, everything should be on the table, Dave, right? Like with Sandberg out of the lineup long-term, with Ehlers now struggling, like this is a time, I think, and I agree with what Drew said. Again, I know we hate to agree with Drew, but in the game against the LA Kings, like that was one thing where, you expected the Paul Maurice line blender to come out, because right now, I mean, there's a lack of offensive punch on this team.
Yeah.
There just is. And, part of that has to do with Scheifele dealing with something here, but there's going to be nights or, in tomorrow's case, afternoons where your top line doesn't have it. And I do expect a big game out of Scheifele, Connor Velarde, because usually they do step up in big game situations. But I mean, Nemesnikov and Perfetti now, they don't have the best player on their line. And, even though the third line of the Jets earlier in the road trip was contributing, right? Niederreiter had a couple goals. I'm starting to forget which game that was, but he had a couple goals earlier in the trip. And so now your depth, there you go, against Minnesota, his former team. Yeah. So, and we talked about it. I mean, the Jets could easily be 1-4 at this point, really, if you consider, how they played in the first half of that game against the Wild, right? I mean, it's easy to say that. You could say, well, last night's game was a 1-goal game, so the Jets could have easily won that, and then they'd be 3-2 on this road trip as opposed to 2-3. We could play that game, but it's been a tough road trip, and I think at this point, like I said, maybe this is simplifying it too much, Dave, but I think if the Jets are able to get out of that game with 2 points, that's going to be huge. I'm not talking about making this road trip a success or unsuccessful. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about this one game.
Yeah.
Get out of this game. And even if you can get a point out of this game, I think with some of the, injuries that have piled up on this team, I think will be, a coup for this team to come out of that game with a dub or even a point. So yeah, I think there's concerns, but again, like you said, this perfect Jets season, I mean, I know there were a lot of people, that were kind of waiting for the shoe to drop, right? But like the season started 15-1, and like you said, the Jets had the same lineup for 16 straight games, not the first 16 games, but for 16 straight games. And now they're dealing with some adversity. They're dealing with some injuries. They're dealing with some losses. What have they lost? 4 of their last 8 or something like that. 2 and 3 on their road trip. So, to me, this is going to test the mental fortitude of this team. Really, you're going to have to go into Dallas and you're going to have to play a mistake-free road game. That's what you're going to have to do to beat this team.
Yeah, and again, the uncharacteristic mistakes all ended up in the back of the net. Like, how often do you ever see Adam Lowry in no man's land not knowing who he's supposed to take, right? There's a lot. The only positive I would say is that the mistakes were not made by one player yesterday. It was a number of players. We don't have a lot of show left, but probably we should highlight Cole Perfetti breaking out of his goalless drought. We probably could have talked about that because you could see the frustration with him and not being able to. Every guy wants to contribute, and you're in the top 6. You have to be able to score. You have to be able to put points on the board. What do you think? Do you think this kind of springboards him now that he's got the 2 goals and is going to feel a little bit less like he's clutching the stick a little tight?
Well, I think Dave, you and I are the Cole Perfetti apologists on the show, and a lot of people were saying, well, he's having trouble with the speed. He's too small. He's having trouble with the physicality. I don't see that. At least the eye test for me, I think Cole Perfetti has had a good start to the season. Is he playing his best hockey of the year right now? I think that's up for debate. But like for me, like we talked about it, right? Like he hits the post in the game against the LA Kings. If that goal goes in 2 games ago, everybody's like, oh, Cole Perfetti's okay now, right? Now he's scored 2 goals against the Vegas Golden Knights, and everybody's okay. Like I think he's still been contributing and playing pretty well defensively. Now, yesterday we talked about it. There was a sequence. I forget if that was the Barbashev goal. I forget which goal it was, where he was a little bit lost in the defensive zone, right? But then
it was the Barbashev goal.
It was the Barbashev second goal, I believe, right? And again, we're not here to micromanage Cole Perfetti's game. Maybe we are. I don't know. But I mean, I think he's still rounding out his defensive game. And I think that's where he's under the microscope with Scott O'Neill and the coaching staff, right, Dave? Like, if he makes 1 or 2 bad decisions, it seems to be magnified, right? As opposed to maybe if Kyle Connor does it or Mark Scheifele does it. But I think Cole Perfetti's been fine. I think he's a very intelligent player. That's obviously something we've been talking about since he was drafted back in 2020, right? And I think that's, his vision and his smarts are his 2 biggest assets. He's a fantastic distributor of the puck, and he can also put the puck in the net, and he's got a decent shot. So I do think that this is going to help his confidence, obviously, Captain Obvious speaking here. But, they're going to need Perfetti to be more of a line driver, Dave. I really believe that. Nikolai Ehlers is the guy who stirs the drink on that second line. Without him in the lineup, Cole Perfetti, there's going to be, speaking of magnifying glasses, I think he's going to be even more under the microscope, magnifying glass, whatever you want to say. And similar thing with Perfetti. Like, this is not a 19-year-old player anymore. Perfetti's been in the NHL now for several years. Like, it's time to stop viewing him, as like we do, like Brad Lambert, for example, who's only 20 years old, right? So yeah, I think it's just great to see, right? Like on the goal that he scored, the first goal that he scored, the tip in the first period, right, Dave? You saw him jump up in the glass. So that's just great to see, because obviously he's probably the most unenthusiastic goal celebrator maybe we've ever seen. He usually just kind of scores a goal, and because he scored so many goals over the course of his junior career, he kind of just gives a little fist bump, goes to the bench. So it was nice to see him get the monkey off his back yesterday.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that, Drew. I mean, Drew, sorry, I was texting Drew, trying to get him to send me the sponsor reads because, of course, heaven forbid he actually gets something done, as he. But look, I think that he's going to be such an important player for the Jets, and yeah, this is an opportunity for him to kind of start to build. And he's going up against other guys who have in Dallas tomorrow: Maverick Bork, Logan Stankoven, Wyatt Johnston. I said it the last time when we had Mike Heika on, Dallas really is the model of draft and develop.
Yep.
Almost all their players, not almost all, but probably actually
throw in Thomas Harley in there as well.
Ezzy, look at how many Heiskanen, they've got so many guys that they drafted and developed through the Texas Stars and now the Dallas Stars. They really are, a remarkable team from that perspective. So, it's going to be a tough
remarkable team, but I'm waiting for something else. Just tell me when you want to hit it. Do you want me to hit it?
Sure.
Put on your antlers. It's time for the Minute Moose Minute on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show.
I mean, I'm always happy to do a little.
I had my finger on the cursor was on the Minute Moose Minute bumper there, Dave. And yeah, we've talked a lot about the Dallas Stars. Yeah, they're 14-8, good start to the season. But I was just like, okay, we got 5 or 6 minutes left here. It's time to hit that bumper and talk some Moose hockey.
Well, normally I would agree with you, but the Moose want to do anything but talk about last night's hockey game, which saw them. I mean, again, I will be honest, I was focused on the Jets game. I sometimes will, when I'm at a Moose game and watching a Jets game, I can do it, but I was trying to, unfortunately, at the timing did not work out. So I caught some of the game, and what I caught was not good. The Moose Jets affiliate in the Manitoba Moose were one of the worst games I've seen them play, again, in limited showings, but they got outshot 12-0 in the second period. And again, as I said, I've watched this team almost all their games for 10 years now, and I can't ever remember a game where they didn't get a shot in a period. Maybe it's happened, but I actually don't know. I should have confirmed with the Moose yesterday, although I suspect none of them really wanted to hear from me or talk to me. But it was a poor showing. This team can't score. It's just the reality right now. It's weird because they've got enough veteran guys with Toninato and Shaw and Axel Jonsson-Fjällby to be able to do that, in addition to some of the talented youth in Ford and Chibrikov and Lambert. So it's unusual, but they just can't seem to get it done. I don't have an update on Chaz Lucius quite yet, but I will try. He is IR skating, I can tell you that. So he is skating. He's skating with Danny Zhilkin, who's also a Jets prospect. He had a knee injury, Zhilkin did. And so he is rehabbing it. He actually could be back, not this week against the Calgary Wranglers, of course, one more game, but I think next week they'll take on Belleville. So you might be able to see Danny Zhilkin, the Jets third rounder, in action next weekend. If you want to see the Calgary Wranglers and the Manitoba Moose in action, a game you could probably expect the Moose to have a little bit of a bounce back. Send me an email, dave@illegalcurve.com, or ICDave, or my ICDave at Blue Sky, whatever you want to do. Send me a message, because we've got tickets in the Illegal Curve Zone, so you can go see the Jets of tomorrow as a precursor to the Jets game, because the Moose play at 2:00 here in Winnipeg, and the Jets play 3:30 against the Dallas Stars. So it's going to be a tough one. But like I said, the team only got the one goal late in the game. Nikita Chibrikov got his 4th of the season assist to Brad Lambert and Elias Salamonson. Salamonson, the right shot defenseman from Sweden, of course. He's been looking better and better, getting more comfortable playing on North American ice surfaces. But again, I wouldn't be rushing him into the Jets lineup just yet. A lot of the points, and again, it's worth noting, I think, as a lot of the points that the Jets are scoring right now are from, as a team, are from the on the power play, on special teams. So not a ton of 5-on-5 success. And like I said, not a ton of success, period, unfortunately, for the Winnipeg Jets affiliate in the Manitoba Moose. So it's a bit of a slug, but like all things, they're going to have to see what they've got in the tank. And probably should mention, because we kind of talked about it a little bit, named Dominic Toninato is the 12th captain in the organization's history. Technically, he's the 11th for the Moose, because Jason Jaffrey wore the C when they were in St. John's for 4 years. So technically, it's one of those trivia things, as he's the 11th Moose captain. He's the 12th organizational captain, but he's a good choice. And then along with Dominic Toninato, they named Mason Shaw, who's in his first year here in Manitoba, and well, technically I should say the Jets organization because he's on an NHL contract. And then Ashton Sautner from John Ginsberg's hometown of Flin Flon, Manitoba. He is the other alternate captain. So they'll, like I said, we'll see. These guys have some pride and they're not going to be happy. Calgary's a very good team. The Wranglers, they've got a very good young team.
Well, I was just looking, obviously Dustin Wolf is having a great season for the Flames. Yeah. Wolf was their goalie for 3 or 4 years, Dave.
Yeah, back-to-back AHL goalie.
Evan Cooley, I did not know a lot about, but I'm looking at his numbers. 941 save percentage, goals against below 2 in 15 games, like pretty good. And obviously, there's a few familiar names like Jacob Pelletier is a first-round pick of the Flames. He's a point-per-game player. But like you said, Dave, I mean, I'm not going to add too much to it because obviously I don't watch the Moose a lot. I'm hoping to catch a couple of games, take my kids to a couple of games this year. But, goal scoring, it's got to be better. And like you said, like, Chibrikov and Lambert obviously are leading the team in points right now, but you need some more goal scoring out of those veterans like Tony Nato and Janssen Fjallby and Mason Shaw. And obviously, we're hoping that Chaz Lucius and Danny Zilkin are back in the lineup sooner rather than later. So hopefully they're able to turn it around tomorrow afternoon versus the Calgary Wranglers. But they're going through, like, similar to the Jets right now. They're going through a rough time and they're going to have to find a way to get out of this and, score by committee, right? Usually this team doesn't have necessarily 1 or 2 guys that you can point to right now that are going to score, 2 goals every game. Brad Lambert seemed to be that guy last year. So I'm not sure, Dave, like from what you've watched, like why do you think he's struggling? I know I'm not putting you on the spot here, but obviously, his offensive numbers aren't where we expected them to be, right?
No, I mean, it's a fair point. He's looked good, but I think like a lot of the team, I mean, you watch some of the plays, like yesterday, there's a play in front of the net. The puck comes out. I mean, it's a bad giveaway by Salamonson behind the net. But Lambert is kind of caught whiffing at the puck. He doesn't take the body. So in terms of scoring, I think it's just, they're not playing well defensively. And I think that's leading to not having the puck as much offensively. And I think that's part of it, Ezzy. And so, like I said, this is a team that needs to hit the reset button in a big way because their season's going to get away from them. And the other thing that's questionable, they've gone with Capo Kakinen in the last 4 games. So, maybe they want to get him some games in, but I'm a little surprised that Thomas Milic, and again, Thomas Milic wasn't having the best season either, but I was a little surprised that they haven't gotten him into any of these games he's played. So they let Kakinen play all 3 games against Chicago. And then of course, last night against, I should say Milic did get in, Ezzy, after they pulled Kakinen because Kakinen gave 4 goals on 7 shots against Calgary. So, and I'm not going to entirely blame him. The first 2 goals weren't great, but the team kind of abandoned ship on him on some of the plays. So that's as much Moose talk. And the only other player I should mention who's injured, they're missing Simon Lundmark, who's the right shot defenseman, 2nd rounder of the Jets. So
that's significant because he's a top pairing guy for them, right?
Absolutely. No, it is a big loss. But I will say, like I said, the one positive in Jets land on Friday, Kieran Walton, the 2024 6th rounder, as he
6th round steal. We got to start saying
6th round steal, 6'6" winger, big shot, left shot guy. And he looked really good. Like, honestly, he almost had the hat trick yesterday, 2 goals, 2 assists for Sudbury. He's killing it. He's leading Sudbury, I think, in points by, 13 or 14 on his next closest guy. He's technically tied for 5th in OHL scoring, but he's got a few less goals, or he's got less goals per game than his competition, who are in 5 and 6. So he's ranked 7th right now, but he shoots a lot. He's looking really good. His, like I said, his points per game are like 1.4, I think, or whatever it was. I have what. No, but it was up from, he was 0.66 as he last year. So he's had quite the jump from where.
So hold on, he was 0.66 points per game. He's 6'6", and he was drafted in the 6th round. Is that correct?
That is correct. And sorry, he's 1.
That's a little eerie.
1.56 in terms of his points per game this year. So he's a real good prospect to watch, as is Kevin He, as is Braden Yager. So we'll see. Although it's funny, there's a little controversy on how to pronounce it because the play-by-play voice says Yager, but it's interesting. Our friend Craig Button says Jaeger. So
I thought it was Yager. I mean, usually you want to defer to the play-by-play guy.
That's why I love Craig, but I'm going to defer to the play-by-play voice on this one. So because he keeps saying Yager, so I'm going to go with Yager. Yeah. Although you can't say Jaeger bombs, but anyways, regardless. Okay, well, it's been a great show. We've gone a little overtime because no Mindell, which means Ezzy and I can go long if we want. And that's sometimes what we want to do. But we want to thank you for spending your Saturday morning here with us on the Illegal Curve Hockey Show. By the way, little something to take note of. IllegalCurve.com should be completely up and running. So we've got increased capabilities, increased speed. Everything is running smoothly. Some of the posts from the last few days, unfortunately, may be missing. But the truth is, it was yesterday's news. You don't need to focus on it. On today's site, the morning papers are up. Plenty to read. And then, of course, next day takeaways from our friend Connor Rapchak. So check that out on a little site called IllegalCurve.com. So a big thank you to you for visiting that site every day. A big thank you to you for joining us. Make sure you smash that like button. Make sure you've subscribed to the channel. And a big thank you to all the sponsors of Illegal Curve who make the postgame show, the Saturday show, and the aforementioned website a possibility. They are in no particular order. Rumors Restaurant and Comedy Club, Play Now, Holt Dental, Boston Pizza, City Place, and Seagram's. Support these fine businesses because of their continued support of Illegal Curve Hockey. That's it for Ezzy and I on this Saturday morning. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. We will see you guys and girls back here bright and early, well, on IllegalCurve.com at 7 a.m. for the morning papers. There'll be a practice today. We'll have that in the practice report. And then, of course, tomorrow's broadcast, Illegal Curve postgame show, right around, what is that, 5:10, Ezzy? Is that, no, or 6:10?
It's
6:10.
3:30 start, so 6:10.
6:10. 6:10, around 6:10 here. And again, remember, if you want the Moose tickets, hit me up with an email. But anyways, thanks a lot for joining us. This has been another Illegal Curve broadcast. Have a great rest of your Saturday.
Thanks for listening to this broadcast from Illegal Curve Hockey. For more great Illegal Curve content, subscribe to the Illegal Curve YouTube channel, follow at Illegal Curve on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and visit your online home for hockey in Winnipeg, IllegalCurve.com.